Based on the DNA evidence, we consider the individual in the video we obtained from the Los Angeles Police Department and that we are about to show you on our TV screens to be the person that murdered Rachel Morin on August 5th.
A big break in the murder of Rachel Morin, a mom of 5 attacked on a trail in Bel Air, Maryland 2 weeks ago. Sheriff's officials need your help IDing and finding the man in this video, recorded after a home invasion in Los Angeles in March. Thanks for joining us here on Law and Crime. I'm Angenette Levy. The DNA match and the surveillance video released are major steps in figuring out who murdered Rachel Morin. The chief deputy of the Harford County Sheriff's Office says they received the information about the DNA match and the case in Los Angeles on Wednesday night. Chief Deputy William Davis explained how they found out about the connection between the two cases.
That DNA was analyzed by the Maryland State Police, and it was ran through the National CODIS system. This DNA evidence has come back as a match, tied to a home invasion and an assault of a young girl in Los Angeles this past March. Unfortunately, that suspect has not been positively identified, but he did leave behind his DNA.
The LAPD told me that they are aware of the connection, but they aren't putting out much more information about that March case. We know it involves an assault on a young girl where DNA was left behind, and I've requested the incident report to learn more about it. The video released shows a man leaving the front door of the home in March and what appears to be a person of smaller stature shutting the door. Here's more of Chief Deputy Davis describing the person in the video.
Based on our analysis of this video and witness observations, we believe the suspect to be approximately 5'9", 160 pounds, and of Hispanic descent. We want to make it clear that we believe the suspect acted alone, and he doesn't represent the entire Hispanic community of Harford County, who we are now partnering with to identify this suspect.
Finally, Colonel Davis is reminding people to be careful and to take precautions when visiting the Ma and Pa Trail.
Be alert, walk with a friend, don't allow yourself to be distracted by your cell phone or headphones. And finally, if you see something that makes you feel uncomfortable or that you think is suspicious, act on those instincts and call 911. And lastly, we will continue our increased presence on the Ma and Pa Trail.
Rachel Morin went out for a run on the Ma and Pa Trail in the early evening of August 5th. Her boyfriend reported her missing several hours later. He is now pleading on his Facebook page for people to help identify the man in the video. To get a little more perspective on the importance of this being a stranger attack and the importance of the surveillance video, I spoke with retired NYPD Sgt. Joe Giacalone, who's been following the case closely.
Well, I wasn't too surprised that this was a stranger, and I'll tell you why. I know people say, it's easy to say after the fact, but when the police were up in their patrols, they spent another $20,000 on an ATV. They were showing signs that this was a stranger type, incident. And I was kind of worried about the whole sexual assault thing too. And that's generally what we see in stranger attacks like this. So we don't know for sure what happened, but they're talking about DNA. Listen, she was a jogger. She was in great shape. She could have scratched them. They could be DNA under the fingernails. It could come from a variety of sources, not just the sexual assault, of course. But I think that they still have their work cut out for them to try to track this guy down, because apparently he's coming from LA to Maryland. I mean, that's a long trip. How did he get there? And there's a lot of questions that remain to be answered.
The suspect made his way from Los Angeles in March to Maryland in August, where sheriff's officials say he murdered Rachel Morin. Giacalone says the video contains other important clues that could help track down the killer.
Now, about the video that LA released, you can also see he has a cell phone in his pocket too, because as he's leaving, if you take a look at it and look at it closely, you can see it's something lighting up in his pocket as he's leaving. So now, listen, we have 2 different states. I think the feds come into this. I think they bring all their toys to bear. And I think we look at some geofencing and some triangulation and try to figure out what that cell phone is. Remember, where this happened in Maryland is kind of remote, right? So there's not a lot of people around per se, and they might be able to zone in on a specific phone. And they can actually get it down within a few feet. And because so few people are at that trail at a specific time, they might be able to do so. Now, you remember, he also has to have a plan of escape. So if he was going into this park specifically for this reason, he had a plan of escape. And there's actually, they say they're about a quarter mile into the trail. You have to think that It's got to be like there's a cul-de-sac there.
Giacalone also said this case contains lessons about not pointing fingers at people too early.
I mean, they put the boyfriend through a lot on social media and online about, labeling him as a suspect and all the other things that go along. And again, it didn't come out to be him. So just be careful about who you accuse without evidence, because these things can really damage people, especially when they're grieving and going through difficult times.
Harford County officials do not believe Rachel Morin knew her attacker. They're calling this potentially a random attack, as you heard earlier. I asked Giacalone whether these stranger attacks, which I call boogeyman attacks, happen more often than we think.
No, not really. We are victimized by someone we know most of the time. And when they say most, it depends on which statistic you look at, but generally about 3/4 of the time, it's somebody that's very close to the victim. So the boogeyman or the guy who jumps out of the bushes is very rare, but understand, even if it's 25%, that's still a lot in regards to what we're talking about here. But for law enforcement, these are the cases that can keep you up at night, because they're not going to stop until they're caught, right? Generally, when you have cases where the suspect is the person that's closest to them, these are the easiest ones to close. These, not so much, specifically when you have a guy that's already been across the country.
Harford County has set up a special tip email address. Anyone with information about Rachel Morin's murder or the man in the video can email rmtips@harfordsheriff.org or call 410-836-7788. And just a reminder about what Colonel Davis said. Be aware of your surroundings no matter where you live, and always call 911 if you see something that makes you fearful. Trust your gut. For Law and Crime, I'm Angenette Levy.